Hi everyone, welcome to CUTV News. I'm Jim Masters. Today I have the great honor and pleasure of speaking with award-winning author and founder of Black Rose Press, Roxanne Bland. Roxanne Bland grew up in Washington, D.C., where she discovered strange and wonderful new worlds through her local library and bookstores. These and other life experiences have convinced her that reality is highly overrated. Now, to escape, she writes fantasy and science fiction, romance, and other genres, sometimes all rolled in to the same book. Roxanne is the author of The Breva of Astereth and The Underground, which received a finalists award in the 2017 Reader's Favorite International Book Competition. Her newest book is titled Invasion, which took the silver in the book awards sponsored by Literary Titan. The Silver Award is bestowed on books that expertly deliver complex characters, intricate worlds, and thought-provoking themes. The ease with which the story is told is a reflection of the author's talent in exercising fluent, powerful, and appropriate language. Now, to discuss her new book, Invasion, and also update us on all she's been working on since she was here last with us, Roxanne Bland joins me on CUTV News. Roxanne, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jim. Good to see you.
You've been very, very busy writing. Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
Tell us about the book. Is the book a continuation of The Underground, or is it a totally separate entity?
Well, Invasion is a sequel to The Underground, but it is written as a standalone book. So you don't have to read The Underground before you read Invasion. I wrote it that way for the simple purpose that people would not have to read The Underground first in case you can't find it or if it's out of print or something like that.
So let's back up a little bit for those watching who might not be familiar with The Underground. Let's start with The Underground first. Tell us a little bit about The Underground. And again, that book has been so well received. So I want to touch upon that a little bit.
Well, The Underground is about a werewolf who falls for an amnesiac alien who may or may not be a serial killer terrorizing Seattle. That's the elevator pitch, as we call it. Mm-hmm. And what he has to do, of course, is prove that she's not the serial killer. And of course, in due course of the story, we find out that the serial killer is actually a demon that has been conjured by a witch to start a revolution. Mm. And so that was a lot of fun to write. A lot of little elements going on in there, and a little bit of mystery, a little bit of detective story, certainly science fiction, fantasy, and a little bit of romance.
Absolutely. And that's this book here that we're talking about. I love the covers of your books, too.
Thank you.
How do you come up with the covers? Somebody designs them for you?
No, actually, that cover is my design.
That's your design.
I told my formatter, she also does my book designs, what I wanted. I said, I want a werewolf sneaking out of a door marked deliveries, because that's one of the entrances to Underground. Mm-hmm. And because Underground entrances are all disguised. So I wanted the werewolf to sneak out, like, is anybody watching? and that was the origin of that, mm-hmm. That particular book.
Place of sanctuary for the creatures of the night.
Yes.
Called The Underground.
Yes.
This book has been very well received, hasn't it? Not only from readers, but I mentioned some of the acknowledgments and accolades you've been getting for this book.
Yes, which, to be honest with you, rather surprised me, because first of all, it's so fast-paced. You don't get a chance. I don't give you a chance to sit back and absorb, what has just happened. I just come at you, one. And the other thing is that I was afraid that the sexual content would turn a lot of people off, mm-hmm. because there is a lot of it. It's dripping with it. And it hasn't.
Really?
It hasn't at all. 2 people have mentioned it.
So is it presented in a romantic way, or how is it presented?
It is presented. It's violent. It's not rape per se or anything like that.
Right.
But it's not. nice and loving.
So where do you get the ideas for your stories? And in this case, with the underground, and where does the premise come from, the idea to be able to put these characters together and these stories together? Do they come from real life experiences? Do they come from, fantasy, creation of your own mind, combination of all of the above?
I'd say it's probably a combination of all of the above. How the underground started was really about werewolves. And I was thinking about, what do werewolves do? I mean, are they loners, or do they have a support system of some sort? And then what about all the other paranormals, that live around? Do they have a support system too? Do they like each other? Do they get along? And I just mapped out this whole world in my head and decided that, well, where do they go when humans start to go on a rampage? Where do they go? They have a place that they go to hide out until it's all over. And that place is underground. So it had to be in Seattle because of underground Seattle. So I mapped this whole thing out in my head before I put pen to paper, so to speak, or pixel to computer keyboard. And that has been one of the most interesting things I have done. In terms of my writing, is just simply mapping out that whole structure in my head. I don't use outlines or anything like that.
Do you just sit there in front of the computer and it comes out of you, or it just rolls out of you?
It rolls out.
Really?
Needs editing, but it rolls out.
So do you get up like late at night sometimes with thoughts and start going to that computer and start?
Sometimes.
You do. Now, do you also walk away from it sometimes and let it sit and let it brew a little bit and then go back to it?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that important to do that?
Yes, because when I start losing focus, that means, okay, you need to get up, you need to go get some tea, you need to go get something else, you need to do something, and then come back to it when I'm able to concentrate a bit more. No, so I do sometimes lose focus as I'm like, what did I do? What do I want to do here? And that's when I know I have to get up.
So this book, The Underground, again, which is an incredible book. I've read this book. What do you describe it as being? Is it fantasy? Is it romance? Is it science fiction? Is it a combination of everything? Because I know you do like to incorporate a little of everything into your works. What would this file under?
I would call it a dark, paranormal, urban fantasy / science fiction. Even though there's a big romance in there, I think if you have too much in there, it'll scare people away.
Yeah.
So
then who is your reader for The Underground? Is it the same reader that would follow the first book, the other book too as well?
Mareva of Astaroth?
Yeah, would that be the same reader, or are they different readers?
I think they're different readers. I think those who read the Mareva of Astaroth are people who appreciate a slow build-up and world building. I mean, the Mareva of Astaroth's world is very detailed, and that takes time. And so some would say the story is slow-paced. And therefore, I would not expect a reader for Mareva of Astaroth to do something as fast-paced as The Underground. I think The Underground is for people who just like to be whap, 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 whap. Who just like to be slapped across the face just over and over and over again without giving time to think.
So there's a lot of action. There's a lot of movement within the story.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that's attracting a younger demographic as well, because they like quick and get to the point quick, and what's the next scene, give me more. You're finding that the case?
I would probably say so, judging by, no, I don't know anybody who's actually read the book except my mother, but judging from the reviews that I see, you can tell who are the millennials, who are the younger readers, and who are the older readers, and I'd say it's really appealing to the younger crowd. Because they are used to things happening quickly, without, I won't say it's so much think on your feet as it is things happening so quickly they don't give you time to breathe. Because next thing you know, it's something else, it's something else, it's something else, and their attention span.
It almost sounds like a movie script for an action movie or for
It does, doesn't
a thriller or something. Yeah, it does.
It does, doesn't it? I would love to send it to
to turn that into.
I would love to turn it into a movie. In fact, one of my reviewers did say I could see this being a movie, even if it's straight to video. She says, I can see this being a movie.
I mean, even just from the cover of this book, Invasion, this looks like something like that. I mean, a Close Encounters or a Poltergeist or any of these types of things. It's beautifully done. Tell us how it goes from The Underground to Invasion. It's sort of a sequel, but it's not a sequel, but it is. Tell us about the part where it is a sequel from The Underground.
Well, in The Underground, three of our main characters have cast a spell, okay? And the alien has come back and she's saved everybody from the demon, okay? Well, when Invasion opens, the spell has gone wrong. And they're losing their powers are mingling, and for example, the vampire is losing most of his powers. The mage has become part werewolf, and the werewolf has become part vampire, because their auras are all mixed up. So you have, this has happened as a result of that spell, and the alien, she has actually left. At the beginning of Invasion, she has left because she and the werewolf Parker, her lover, were fighting all the time. So, basically she said, screw this, I'm gone. And so she leaves, but then, she does come back because all of her planet-side hideouts were compromised. So Earth is the only place she can go to get away from her nemesis, who is following her all over the galaxy trying to catch her. So Earth is really the only place she can go to be safe. And as it turns out, of course, he has followed her to Earth with his war fleet. So now you have the three paranormals who have to find a way to break the magic tie that binds them. But then with the alien, they have to figure out a way to stop an alien invasion of Earth. So in a way, it's kind of hard to tell it because the two stories don't seem to meld all that well. It's kind of hard to talk about it, but when you read it, you see where the tendrils, what binds them together, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I love the description in the back of the book itself, the text. The trysts, a potent spell, had worked to quell the riots between humans and exotics, Zots. But for the three powerful Zots who had cast it, it nearly meant their destruction. Entangled now not just by their past loves and jealousies, their auras now entwined or bound when the well-intended tryst went terribly wrong.
Right.
How did you come up with that? That sounds exciting. It's definitely a page turner.
Well, I had definitely thought about that before I finished The Underground. I definitely thought about it. I knew the spell had gone wrong. And so it was just a question of how wrong. And it turns out it was terribly wrong, because they are finding themselves, for example, the mage, if she doesn't learn how to control her werewolf, she's going to be a berserker. And she's going to be a berserker mage. And the only thing you can do with a berserker is kill her. But if she's a berserker mage, then she has magical powers. How do you deal with that? So yeah, the stakes get kind of high with their auras being mixed up and what they are, what they have become. Let's put it that way. It's really what they have become because of their auras being mixed up.
So is there a message in this book? Is there something you're trying to say, something you're trying to leave people with? You hope that they pick up, not just find the book entertaining and a great read and riveting and all of that, but thought-provoking as well? Is there something a message underlying?
Well, I think if there's anything, and it's kind of buried in there, I have to say, but if there's anything in there, I think it's about forgiveness. When you are hurt, when someone does you a terrible wrong that devastates you to your very core, do you forgive them? Can you forgive them? And I think that is one of the themes that runs through the story, especially on the part of one of the characters. You know, forgiveness. Can you forgive me? Do you forgive me? And the question is, can they? Can you? And I think that, you know, for one of the characters, you know, the answer is yes. For the other character, it's very ambiguous. Mm-hmm. It's very ambiguous. I did that deliberately. Whether or not forgiveness is forthcoming is something he has to think about.
Did you feel that there was a need for a book like this at this particular time in our culture and our society? Forgiveness? Were you hoping to teach a lesson, give a hint to society, or did this just happen on its own and you weren't thinking about doing that, but that's what resulted?
I think I wasn't thinking about that, but that's what resulted.
Because the timing is perfect.
I rarely have messages that I'm thinking about when I write my books. And it's usually not until after I have finished them and started editing and maybe have made a couple of passes at editing, full edits, that I realize, oh, there is a message with this book. And it is X, Y, and Z. So no, I can't say that, you know, I went into it with anything in mind, but it came out that way. And forgiveness is, you're right, forgiveness is something that we need to take seriously. We need to think seriously about because this world has gotten so unforgiving that I wonder if it could be a harbinger. There's this hard line. I wonder if it could be a harbinger of our destruction. You never know.
Interesting. This book, again, when you talk about the creation of the characters, where do the characters come from? Do they come from elements of your own life or elements of people that you know in your life in the characters?
The characters are all me.
They're all you.
They're all me. They're all facets of my personality. Elements of my personality.
Really?
Yes, they are all me. For example, the vampire, especially in the underground, he is a naughty boy, shall we say. Man, if I could get away with it, I would so definitely be Kurt. If I could get away with it. And of course, he's a vampire regent, so he can. Parker, yes, the werewolf who is actually a sweetheart. I won't say teddy bear, but he's a real sweetheart, and he'll only kill you if you deserve it. You know, he's not one of these guys who just goes berserk and starts ripping humans apart for the fun of it. I mean, yeah, he'll kill you, but only if you deserve it. Then we have Melora, who's basically, you know, the kick butt heroine. And that's definitely me. I think Melora is my alter ego. Mm-hmm. And Garrett, you know, Garrett is has the command of the elements at her hands. And she too can do just about anything with her magical powers. Yeah, I could see me as Garrett. I could see me as Melora. I can see me as Kurt. And I can see me as Parker. I'm all of them. I think personalities, I think people have personalities that are like facets of a diamond. You know, there are certain parts of me, there's a certain part of me, a mask, if you will, that I show when I'm in this group of people. And there's another mask I have when I'm in this group of people. It depends on who I'm with. The mask that I have on when I'm at work is very different than the mask I have on when I'm at the club. Mm-hmm. Not that I ever go to clubs, but you get my drift.
Yeah.
And I think that's where all of those characters came from. I think they're all part of me. And I think that's where all my characters, Mareva of Astoreth, Mareva Tehid, and Laird Tegger, I think they too are aspects of me.
I like that quote that you said, that people's personalities have facets of a diamond. That's an interesting way to look at it, and it's very, very true. But it's an amazing way to put that into perspective in such a way, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I firmly believe that, because how many times have you seen somebody in a certain situation and they're behaving in a certain way, and then you just happen to catch sight of them outside, different clothes, different demeanor, and you're looking at them like, I know this person, I think I do, but I'm not sure. And then you get or then they recognize you or something like that, and then their other persona comes up, the one that you know. I think that's what happens. I think that's what people do. I really think that's what they do.
When you write these books, I know you get really deeply emotionally involved in them. Again, the Mareva of Astoreth, The Underground, and now the newest book that we're talking about, which is Invasion. You get fully invested and wrapped into the storyline, the characters, the location, the message, all of it. How deep does it really get for you? Does it ever overwhelm you? Do you ever feel at the mercy of the content, of the characters? Are you ever engulfed by it?
That is a really good question. And I have to say that the answer is probably yes. At times, that I forget where I am. This world is the only world that is real to me. And I think I do get there sometimes. I don't get there all the time. But I think I have been there. I have been there, not once, not twice, but many more times than that.
Do you ever get trapped in it, where it's tough to get out? If that makes any sense,
No, it's never been tough to get out, and I think that's because deep down, I know I have I have to come back to this world for whatever reason, and I can't stay in that world. So I think those things that I keep in the back of my mind, something as mundane as feed the dog.
Right.
The
basics.
The basics.
Pay the light bill.
Pay the light bill. I think that's what keeps me anchored, because otherwise I could get lost in these worlds. I could stay there for weeks and not eat.
Do you ever wish you could live in them?
Oh, absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely.
If there was a machine you can go into, press a button, and you can be in these books.
Absolutely.
You would, in a heartbeat, do
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope they wouldn't hold it against me, but I'm human. Unless I could go in as something else.
Right.
Unless I could go in as a paranormal. But if I have to go in and I have to go in as a human, I hope that they won't hold it against me. Because I think y'all are wonderful.
We thank you for that. So take us a little bit more through this book. I want you to share maybe even something from the book so our audience can get a real sense of the importance of this book and the storyline and the concept and the character development and what the story is actually about. Again, like you said, I would recommend they read The Underground. It's really, really a cool book. Amazon.com has it, as does her website. However, you don't have to have read, as you said when we went to dinner the other night, The Underground. This can be a fresh. It's good to have The Underground because some of the elements, things carry over a little bit, but you don't have to.
Right.
So for those who haven't read The Underground, take us through this story a bit, if you can.
Well,
and we're talking about Invasion, of course.
Right, we're talking about Invasion.
We're talking about the new book.
Well, it starts off with Kurt standing before a window.
And now Kurt is the...
Kurt is the vampire regent. He's the ruler of Seattle, paranormal Seattle. So he's standing in front of the window in his office, and he's contemplating losing his powers. That they're almost gone. And of course, what happens is that, first of all, if any human ever finds out what he is, he's dead. And then if any of his vampire brethren, shall we call it, finds out that he's weakened, he's also going to be toppled from his Seattle throne, so he's dead. And then we have Parker. I'm just going to give you kind of an idea of what's going on in the first couple of chapters. So Kurt, in Underground, there's a piece, a couple of words where he feels diminished. And he's like, why do I feel diminished? Why do I feel like this? Well, this is why. He's starting, even then, he's feeling it. He's losing. And then in chapter 2, we have Parker, who is contemplating the fact that Mellora's gone, and he's miserable. And then his duty calls, because if you remember from Underground, he neglected the pack to hang out with Melora. And so now he's doing his duty. And he doesn't want to, but he has to. He's alpha of the pack. And then, of course, we have Garrett, who, the mastermind of the tryst. And it's gone wrong. It's gone horribly wrong. And that's when she finds out that she's part werewolf. So she runs to her mentor in France and says, you gotta help me. And he's like, well, not sure we can. And so, but he says, because your magic didn't work very well, maybe it has some holes in it. So maybe we can take those holes and exploit it and break the spell. Because the tryst is a one-way street. The tryst spell is a one-way street. And so this is the forms of basis of Invasion. This is the ties that it had from the Underground. This is where the Underground continues into Invasion. For those three anyway. And Melora is still working on her father's code that she was working on from the Underground. Of course, she can do that anywhere. She doesn't have to be on Earth. And that's one of the reasons why she left. I mean, I can do this anywhere. I don't have to be here. So she leaves, but then comes to find out that while she was gone, her nemesis was very busy looking for her. And all of her hideouts in her own galaxy were compromised. So she had no place to go but to come back to Earth. So this is what she did. And that's why she's back in Earth. That's why she's back at her island hideout. And then she discovers, while she's in she doesn't go to Seattle directly, to see Parker or anything like that. But then while she's in her island hideout, that's when she discovers that her nemesis has followed her to this planet. And that is how Melora ends up back in Seattle, because she's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get Parker and we're going to get out of here. But of course, Parker says, no, you got us into this mess. You're going to help us get out of it. So, but that's where the Underground, that's where it segues, shall we say. That's where it segues into Invasion, is through those particular ties between the two books. And then, of course, Invasion takes off and goes in its own direction. So
that's cool. It really is. How long did it take you to write this book?
Well, I have to be honest. I have to be honest. Half of this book was written several years ago.
Really?
Yes. And then I had the Morava of Asteroth come through. That project demanded to be written. And then I had the rewrite of The Underground, which demanded to be written. So I did that. And then I finally came back to this book and finished it in a space of 5 months. So I would say, oh, it took me 5 months to finish the book, but that's not true. It took me 5 months to finish it. All in all, it probably took me about a year.
So this was started before the other books? Then put aside?
This was started before the Morava of Asteroth.
Before the Morava of Asteroth.
It was started right after I finished the first edition of The Underground back in 2013. So this book has been, so the first half of this book has been around for quite a while.
Now, is this the book that's getting all the praise on Amazon? There's a book that, one of these books has 28 comments and reviews. Is it this one?
It's both Underground and Invasion.
And when people go to Amazon.com, you've got like almost 30 reviews thus far, and it's a new book.
Right, and especially this one.
Yeah.
30 reviews thus far, and it's a new book.
And what are people saying who are reading this book, who are going on Amazon.com, and who are leaving these incredible comments? Because that's a lot. You can go to some, there are books that are widely known that are on Amazon.com and other places, where you'll see 1 or 2, 3, maybe 4 comments. You've got almost 30 here in a short span of time. What's happening?
Well, they say that this is, I've never read a book like this before. At first I thought it was going to be basically a dud because it had so much going on in it. But as it turns out, she has a deft hand to keep things going but not let it get overwhelming. They like the action. They like the fast-paced action. They tell me which characters they like the best. They like Kurt the best, or they like Parker the best. It's really been interesting to see the people's reaction to this book. And none of them have mentioned the sex scene, which is really interesting to me.
It's just part of this. They see it not as an element that stands out from the story.
Exactly.
They see it as an element that's part of
the story.
That fits in and makes sense with the story. So I'm assuming that you could probably go to these conventions and these conferences where there's lots of science fiction fans and other authors, things of that nature, and you'll have swarms of people coming to you because of these books, because of the unique nature of these books. And it's in line with the type of material that obviously your readers have a thirst for. You've found a niche. Not that these books aren't great for everybody. Anybody could really read it and absorb something from it. But you have found an extra niche of people who are following along, which means, you know what that means?
Right.
And this book, Invasion, isn't finite.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think their next adventure, well, I wrote, there's a short story that's connected with this. It takes place 600 years in the future. And basically, it's what happens to the characters after invasion. And I thought about it, because I thought about, okay, if I do another book set on Earth, what are they going to do? They've already stopped an alien invasion. What's next? So what I did was I wrote this little story called Forever Bound. And essentially, they all leave Earth. So their next adventure is going to take place in space. It's going to take somewhere in the cosmos is where it's going to take place. Maybe on an alien planet, maybe not. I mean, there's lots of stuff that can happen to you in deep space. You know, you don't have to be planet-side or anything like that.
Would you ever want to travel into space if you had an opportunity to go with others to explore space, visit another planet? Would you ever volunteer to do something like that? Is that something?
I'm first in line.
I could see it in your eyes.
I'm first in line.
It's almost like, Jim, do you know what you're asking me?
Yeah.
It's a yes. Really. What is it about it? Is it the fact that it's foreign, it's unknown, it's different, or is it that it also takes you away from here?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both.
Somehow I knew that, yeah.
I think it's the fact that it's so new, it's so different, and one of the things that I think keeps me going is the new and the different. The same old thing has its place. It's great to come back to, so you can get your bearings, get your anchor together or something like that. But I prefer the new, the exciting. Oh, it's so different. It's nothing like I've ever seen or heard or read before, and that's why I would be first in line. I mean, if I could afford it, Spaceship Two, I'm there. I am there. You want somebody to volunteer to go to Mars? Oh, I'm 70, but I'll do it. I'll go.
Right.
But you'll find I'm in good shape.
And she's not 70.
Right. Right. But still.
But when you're 70, when you're 80,
when that Mars
go.
mission is ready, I am there. And they need civilians, I am there.
These books, Invasion, The Underground, The Moravian of Astaroth, how much of this, we've talked about elements, breaking down the construction of the books themselves for our audience. There may be other writers out there too who are intrigued by your writing style. As I said in the introduction, you do weave a lot of different elements of different genres into a book. So when you pick up a Roxanne Bland book, you don't know what you're in for, which is really exciting and really cool, because just when you think you're going down this road, this comes in. Then you think she's taking you down this curve, and boom, this pothole is in there. And there's elements, like you say, of science fiction, of fantasy, of thriller, of a variety of different things, all elements of life. So in sort of deconstructing these books and the theme of the books, what is it that you feel attracts you to this style of writing that you have and the desire to incorporate so many different things into one text, into one book?
Well, I think it's because life isn't like that. Life isn't one or two things.
Yeah, good way to look at it.
in your path. It's not one. I mean, life throws curveballs all the time, and it might be a fantasy curveball, or then again it might be a science fiction, or then again it might be a thriller. And I think our lives are a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of thrillers, a little bit of mysteries. I think that's what our lives are. And my writing and my characters all live that kind of life, in the sense that, life is always throwing stuff at us. Whether we can handle it or not is a different story, but life is always throwing stuff at us. And it's up to us, to deal with it or not. And so I think that's why I write the way I do. Because our lives are a little bit of everything. Like if I can get out of here during this snowstorm, that's my thriller for the day.
At the time of the taping of this, there is a snowstorm outside. Exactly. But I bet you could turn that snowstorm into a story.
Bet you
Characters.
I could. Bet you I could.
So, again, talking about the themes of these books, Invasion, specifically when you set out to write this book, which again, like you said earlier, there's elements of this book that you wrote years ago that you sort of set aside. What was the push to get you to say, now's the time to take this book, finish it, expand on it? And also, did you change anything that you had written before? The parts of the book you wrote years ago that you put in the drawer that you then brought out. Was any of that changed, rewritten, altered, or did you just pick up where you left off?
I literally picked up where I left off.
You did. So then when you did that, what made the timing for this now? Were there people in your family, in your life, were there circumstances that said, it's time for Invasion?
I guess it was kind of an itch. When I finished The Underground and I finished a lot of that, well, I finished that first round of marketing for The Underground. When I said to myself, okay, it's time to get back to writing because marketing just messes with my head, and it's time to get back to writing. And I sat down and I read over what I had done with Invasion, and I said, okay, this is where we're going to start. I mean, in fact, I had left off in the middle of a chapter, and I just started finishing up. I finished up that chapter and kept on going. Mm-hmm. I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew what I wanted to do with the story and where it was going to end up. But it certainly wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I just kept typing, say, see where I go, see where I go, see where I go, the way I usually work. And it was not until I reached the end of the story that I realized that, hey, this was pretty linear to me. It was pretty linear. It was. Mm-hmm. I just whipped right through it, which is why I guess I finished the rest of the story, the other half of the story, within 5 months or so. Mm. I mean, it was real. That's really fast for me. Really fast for me. I'm not a fast writer. I own up to it. That's why it takes me a year, sometimes 16 months, to write a book, between my day job and everything else. But I can, even though I'm sitting down every night, get up at 2, 3 in the morning and sitting down, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm busy clicking away. I might be sitting there staring at the screen wondering what comes next.
When you're writing the book, and as you're doing that, going back to it, picking up where you left off, adding to it, how much does events in your daily life, events that you see happening in society, news events, things that are happening around you, suddenly get immersed into the book? Like, for example, maybe there's something that you've witnessed that's happened to you or a friend or a family member or something you saw in the news. And you're like, I'm not going to put those exact details in the book because it doesn't fit. But there's elements of things that are going on now that get merged into the actual books. Does that happen for you? Sometimes.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes what happens is a piece of reality, shall we say, manages to make its way into my book, but it's so disguised that even I don't see it until I'm editing, and I remember this. But sometimes pieces of the real world make it into my books, but usually I'd say probably not. Not that I want to, keep my worlds as separate as possible, which, is a goal, but generally what I come up with comes out of my head.
Mm-hmm. You go with the flow?
I go with the flow. I generally don't put the real world or events in the real world in my books.
Do you try sometimes not to overthink or overanalyze and just let it flow?
Yes, I do have a tendency to overthink and to overanalyze, and I try to let it flow because otherwise I just tie myself up in knots. And that's when sometimes I have to get up and go back to reality for a little bit in order to just to decompress. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, then you can go back to when you can look at it with a fresh eye. Fresh eyes. That's the most important thing to me, is fresh eyes. And because when you look at it with fresh eyes, you can see, oh, this is where I was going, but then I zigzagged over here. Well, I don't think I should do that. And so I can go back and change it.
Absolutely. In knowing you as long as I have, with the radio interviews that we've done another TV video interview, and this is your second interview with us here on CUTV News. I know that for you, the books are meant for the reader, for the entertainment of the reader. But they're also just as important for you. I think they're a cathartic experience for you. They are almost a therapeutic experience for you. You need to be writing these books as much as the reader needs to be reading them.
I would say that's true. These books are definitely therapy for me. They help me to cope with the real world by being able to create my own and being able to control what goes on in my world. It gives me that sense of control so I don't feel so overwhelmed when I'm not in my world or when I'm in the real world. I can say this is not in my control, and that's okay, because I have a place to go where everything is in my control. And that's just one aspect of the therapeutic nature of writing for me. But it is definitely therapeutic. It just releases so much that has been pent inside. And I find it very, very helpful.
You know, I think this is why the response has been so great to these books, and you're getting all these comments on Amazon and elsewhere, is because people that are reading these books might also see elements of themselves in these books. And even though some of these stories are, they're exaggerated and they're exotic and they're, creative and bold, still the reader probably is finding bits and pieces in some of the characters that remind them of either people they know or of themselves. They're seeing reflections of themselves. And people like things that are relatable. No matter how fantastical it may be presented, which these are obviously, they're creative, they're fantastical, like I said, they're adventurous, they're exotic, they're colorful. At the same time, people, I think, are finding elements within these books that they can relate to and relate in regards to their own lives.
That's interesting. I have not thought of it that way. But, perhaps you're right. But when you were talking, I was thinking of some of the reviews that I have gotten from both Invasion and The Underground. And people have said, I really identify with some of these characters. And I guess I just kind of glided over them. It's like, okay, well, that's nice. Thank you. Where are my 5 stars, please? But I think you're right. I think people do identify, at least to some extent, the beleaguered werewolf. I think they do identify to some extent, at any rate.
So as you write these books, I think you're realizing more and more the voice that you have and the power of the voice and the fact that people are, first they were therapeutic for Roxanne, and now you're touching other people's lives through these fantastical stories. And there's a power to that, an importance to that, and a value to that. And I think that is also attracting the readers. And that also affects your treatment of the books too, like Invasion, Underground, Invasion, and going forward, knowing that there's this mass of people out there who are following you, who adore your writing style, who love these stories, and who are being left with certain feelings and messages that they take away in their own lives. That puts a whole different spin on it for you, doesn't it, than just an author writing books for fun?
Well, yes, it does. It really does, because, like we were talking about before, I usually don't realize I have a message until after the book is like basically finished. And then you send it out into the world. And if other people are getting your message, other people are getting, your writing style, they're getting, what you're trying to get across, then yeah, does that create the kind of obligation? Does that create an obligation in the author to his or her readers? And that's a really good question, because I have to decide when that puts me under a little bit of pressure to write the next book, to write the book with these characters. And how soon is it going to come out? How long is it going to take? Because I don't want to sit there.
Red carpet appearances and all those things.
Well, it's not even that.
I
don't want to, well, like I said, it takes me about a year to 16 months to write a book because of various other stuff that goes on.
Life, jobs, everything.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to come out with another book in 8 months and have it be terrible.
Right. You don't want to just bang out another book for the sake of another book, like an assembly line.
Yes.
You take time. And like you said, when you write the book, sometimes you don't realize you're even delivering this message.
Right.
What I think is really good about that, Roxanne, is the fact that it comes from your heart and your soul, and you're sort of bearing it through these characters in an authentic way. If you approach these books from the perspective of, I just want the 5 stars, I just want to sell the books, I just want the money, if that's first before the books and the message and the content and the storyline and the covers and everything else, then it's a totally different approach. But you're writing these books because something takes you over, it flows out of you, here it is, now let's package it up and get it out there, what happens, happens. It's much more authentic that way.
Exactly, and I don't want to feel pressured that I have to get this book out in 8 months because my readers want to see another book. Because readers are merciless.
Sure.
If I put out,
if they love you, they love you.
But even so, if you put out a series and it's great, and then for whatever reason they're not so great, readers are merciless. They will tear you apart. I've seen it now. Not that he cares, because he's, whatever he puts his name on, it becomes an instant bestseller. James Patterson.
Sure.
I've seen it happen to him. I've seen it happen to Stephen King. I mean, just merciless. Just tear them apart.
Well, you even tweaked The Underground, right?
Oh,
too,
yes.
Based on initial response.
Absolutely.
Now, in the beginning, were you hesitant to do that because you didn't want to change the story that was your initial story?
Well, I don't know. Yes, I was hesitant. I don't know if it was because I didn't want to change the initial story, because I knew I wasn't going to do that. I think I was hesitant because I was being, defiant. Well, you don't like my story? Well, too bad.
Boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo, exactly. But then, then you start thinking about it. And, well, maybe they got a point.
Maybe they have some suggestions, some ideas. Because it's very unusual for an author to do that. And you actually took the reader's suggestions and thoughts in mind and sort of reconfigured that particular book.
Yes.
By doing that, is it a better book?
Oh, yes. I think it's a much better book.
And again, we're talking about the second edition of The Underground.
I think it's a much, much better book. And I think that the world must think so too, because not only the reviews that I've been getting, but it was awarded a finalist.
That's right. I mentioned that this book really.
In Reader's Favorite International Book Competition. So obviously it's a much, much better book.
I just want to do a little bit of a recap, if we can, for folks that are watching. We talked about The Underground, glazed on that. We talked about Invasion. This one too, if you just want to give us either a refresher for our audience or maybe for people who have not had a chance to know anything more about the Mareva of Ashtoreth, a little bit on this book as well, which is part of your collection.
Well, it's about Mareva Tehi, obviously, who is a scientist, priestess, healer, and a bigot, who falls for a man of the race she despises, and through him learns a terrible secret about her gods that could tear her world apart. Because she has neglected, no, that's the overview. Because she has neglected to perform her sacred duty, her grandmother, the Devi goddess of love, exiles her off to this backwoods town, this village, really, in order to steward a landing beacon there, which is where the gods use to land their spaceships. And so she's stewarding this landing beacon. And so she is thrown into close contact with the leader of the village, the chieftain, whom she hates, who apparently hates her, seems to hate her, but of course that's where the romance goes. And then meanwhile, she has also sneaked her experimentation for the cure for red fever, which is a deadly disease. She sneaked that out of her hometown, and brought it to the village. And of course she finds, she's looking for the cure and so on and so forth. So that's really the gist of it.
Now that story is a little bit slower, right? That story is for
Yes.
somebody to really invest the time, and we're talking about the Moreva of Astaroth, to invest the time and to let this story sort of sweep you off your feet.
Yes.
It's not jump, cut, action, like the other books.
Right.
So you satisfy that crowd. But for those who love to get lost in a story and have the story envelop them, the Moreva of Astaroth
The
is
Moreva
that
of
book.
Astaroth, yes. That is what, that's what the review, there are something like 46 reviews for the Moreva of Astaroth.
Congratulations.
And they all say pretty much the same thing. This story might seem slow-paced to you, and I think it is slow-paced, but it needs to be to give you time to really get into the story.
And to think.
And to
right?
think
and
about
to let
it.
it absorb
Exactly.
and let you escape into it.
Exactly.
So we're talking about, that's the Moreva of Astaroth. So there's that book in her collection. And then, of course, The Underground, which also rave reviews, and this is the second edition. And then the newest book, and definitely not the last from Roxanne Bland, as you heard announced here on CUTV News, Invasion. And again, this book has been really very well received as well, as the others have. And it's an incredible story. It really, really is. Now, do you think the next book will be a sequel to this one? Or who knows? Stay tuned, right?
Yes.
Stay tuned.
Let's leave it at that.
Stay tuned. Well, that is fantastic. Again, Roxanne, it's always a pleasure. What would you want to say to our audience who has yet to experience your style of writing and your fabulous books? What do you hope people are left with? I know you mentioned Invasion, forgiveness. Is there an overall message to your collection of books and your writing style?
Yes. And it's simply that I hope I have given you hours and hours of entertainment. Because if I have done that, then I have done my job as an author. This is showbiz for shy people. And I'm shy.
Sure.
So if you are entertained, if you like my stories, then I've done my job as an author. I see that as my main job, to entertain people.
Exactly. And you're doing that beautifully.
Thank you.
Roxanne Bland, thank you so much for joining us at CUTV
Thank
News
you.
once again. It's always a pleasure. And looking forward to the continuation of your collection and your series, and wish you best of luck always.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
a true joy and a true blessing to many.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Now, Roxanne Bland's books are to be found at Amazon.com. Check it out. Look at all those great reviews. And if you'd like to learn more about author Roxanne Bland, visit her website, roxannebland.rocks. Also, she does have her publishing company as well, Black Rose Press. And you can find out more about the publishing company at blackrosepress.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode of CUTV News. For everybody here, I'm Jim Masters. Thank you for joining us.